All right. Well, hi, everyone. My name's Nat, and today we are taking a deep dive into the scary world of ADHD, medication. Should you not? Can it be treated? Can't it? And all these wonderful, terribly difficult questions. Some of you are going to be quite pro-medication. Others are going to be like, no. Others might be on the fence. Let's keep it polite and respectful today, as I'm sure you all will, but do know that this is a bit of a contentious subject. So I'm going to do my best to give a nice balanced view on what is it useful, is it not? What are the pros, cons, downsides? How does society look at it? So today we are focusing on ADHD because that is what is typically medicated when it comes to neurodivergence. However, you can have medication for the others, but you get medicated for the co-occurring condition. So for instance, I have medication arguably for my autism, but it's not for autism. It's because my OCD is a trait of my autism and I get support for that. So often you get supported for the traits and not for the overarching thing, because there's nothing wrong with that. It's normally about how you kind of interplay within society and the things that go along with that. Now, surely a lot of you know who we are already by now. If not, we're exceptional individuals, small social enterprise, and most of us are neurodivergent, which creates a chaotic but beautiful atmosphere. So do check us out if you want to get to know us more. We do these webinars every single Thursday, and we love doing them. So the fact you're here and supporting is amazing. Now, the last webinar we did, which is currently live at the moment, is Neurodiverse Therapies. We're essentially looking at what therapies are available that support people and how do they apply with a neurodivergent lens? Because let's face it, a lot of the things that are created to support people are just not created with us in mind. So with that, are they helpful or can they be detrimental? Oh, Suzanne says, interesting. Suzanne says, interesting to hear from late diagnosed people. I'm 68 and not able to get a diagnosis, and I live in Scotland, but they were diagnosed late. Do you know what? It's difficult out there. It really, really is. So I feel you. So any kind of support or advice, please do share, everyone. Now, medication or not to medicate? That is the question. People often ask me, should I have medication? Should I not have medication? I want medication. I can't afford medication. Are they too young to be medicated? There's so many questions. We often hear of people saying there's too much medication. But most people who have ADHD do not have medication, and the vast majority who want it can't get it. So it's a lot more complicated than just from the big articles we see in the newspaper. So what we're going to discuss, we're going to be looking at the complexity of ADHD medication, the effectiveness of ADHD medication, and the future of ADHD medication. Must have mistyped, only 63. Yeah, let's not age you up just yet. Okay, fair enough. We're also going to have a little look at the philosophy and biology. Now, this is starting to sound a bit complicated. Honestly, it's not. It's just about the idea. So, for instance, when you're diagnosing, you're just kind of judging traits, looking at a list of the person has that, person has that. And when you're looking at biology, you're looking at, is there something physical that I'm able to see, even if it's like microscopic? So we're going to be clearing up some misconceptions, and we're going to be looking at a biopsychosocial approach. So that is merging the two together, psychology, biology, and is that going to make it easier in the future to know what medication is best and what medication is not? Because I'll be honest with you, often between stimulants and non-stimulants, it's a bit of a shot in the dark. We normally try one. If it works, cool. If it doesn't, we try the other, and we go back and forth. If you have no idea what I mean by stimulants or not, hold tight. So, quick question to get you all thinking. How can we fix misunderstandings about medication in ADHD? It's a really big one, because let's face it, I'm sure you've all seen like maybe documentary on Netflix and things where you see like lots of kids in America, like being like over medicated. You see kids who are like zombies, who have lost that spark, but you also see people who are functioning amazing now. Is the media overhyping it? Is it underhyping it? Why is the NHS so goddamn bad when it comes to ADHD? There's so many interesting questions. So we got stop misrepresenting it on TV dramas. Absolutely. A while back, we did a webinar on ADHD in pop culture. And essentially, every ADHD character, they just pinpoint on the one thing about someone being a bit scatty, all over the place. And to play for that joke, they're not showing a three-dimensional image. It's not just for wild boys. Yeah, Bart Simpson, you can sit down. Lisa Simpson could have it too. I don't think she does, but it's possible. And we need to show a wider broad of what it looks like. We've got understanding that everyone is unique. What works for one person may not work for someone else. Boom, boom, boom. Yep, absolutely. So often people say, well, my son's on medication. I think this. No, that's one example. Do know that it's different for everyone and make it clear that we're not qualified to give advice. We can kind of share opinions, but just be mindful. Oh, Diana says, my two younger children, now nearly 30 years old, both diagnosed with ADHD in the 1990s. What a great decade. Both put on different meds, then both put on different meds, then onto Ritalin for the next 8 or so years till teenager decided to stop taking it themselves. That's interesting. And that's also another interesting debate. How much choice should people have? Like when you're younger, can you make those choices? Look back at family histories and clues. So what are the key challenges in ADHD medication treatment? So what is like the thing which everyone is kind of getting hung up about? Is it philosophical challenge? Why do I keep putting words I can't read? Biological challenge, stigma, access, or personal preference. So the things that people find the most challenging. Okay, so it's moving around. Biological challenges. Why could that be a big challenge? Well, how do you pinpoint it? There could be things due to how your body is, other factors. Stigma, I'm not surprised that normally gets the top spot, to be honest. If people think that it's going to zombie you out, they might not take it. If people think that it means you're unwell, you might not take it. It could be personal preferences. Maybe you want a more holistic approach and you're just not into Western medication. Fair enough, but it might stop you from getting the support. And also like different religions and cultures. So there's many, many reasons why this is such a contentious subject. Now, what exactly is the medication? We're going to get a little bit sciencey right now. So neurotransmitters. Essentially, in your big old brain box, you've got neurons. These are like little things that kind of connect the dots. And at the end of these neurons, you kind of have things that kind of pump out chemicals. I'm going to keep it really simple today, just because I don't think we need to get bogged down in the information. But they squirt the chemicals out, well, kind of like go through. And those things are called neurotransmitters. And, things like serotonin, dopamine, all oxytocin, endorphins, these are all neurotransmitters. So basically, if you hear the word neurotransmitters, think neuro as in brain, transmitter as phone. They are chemicals that send messages. These chemicals are essential for when I think, put my hand in the air, hand goes in the air, like everything that your body does. Now, dopamine, which we often consider the feel-good chemical, oh yeah, I need that dopamine hit. But it has many different roles in our body, is one of the key neurotransmitters in regulating mood. Not the only one, but one of the key ones. And then we've got the other one, which is main one involved in focus and attention. Now, a lot of you should know this by now, I'm hoping. ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactive Disorder. Now, you might have the attention deficit part, or you might have the hyperactive part, or you might have a combination of both. But depending on if you have 1, 2, 3 types of ADHD, it is going to really play a different impact on what type of medication you might find useful. So when we're taking medication, we are either increasing the amount of neurotransmitters, we are increasing the likelihood that our brain can suck it all up and enjoy it, or we are blocking chemicals from being reabsorbed into the brain. So there's many different things that these medications does, and it kind of depends on which one does what. Okay, if you want any more clarification, let me know, but I don't want to bore you all just yet. Can neurotransmitter understanding change ADHD medication assumptions? So what does that mean? Can understanding how chemicals actually work in the brain get rid of that bias and stigma? That's one of the key questions here, because at the moment we think it kind of stops you being from you, but chemicals is how our body works. From having coffee in the morning to alcohol to kind of running, like everything we do increases chemicals. It's not this unnatural process. It's literally how we live and work. So the first one is ADHD meds alter brain chemistry and moods. Do you agree? Yeah, most of you do. It does. But again, everything, the food you eat increases your chemistry and your mood. So does like the Netflix series you watch. Not a big deal. Stimulant meds have pros and cons in managing ADHD. Yep, that's pretty solid. They aren't all sunshine and rainbows. Everything has a trade-off. And you often have to ask yourself, is the trade-off worth it? Is the juice worth the squeeze? Therapy and lifestyle changes help with ADHD. Absolutely. It isn't all about medication. Sometimes a bit of healthy exercise, eating well, getting some fresh air in the Italian Alps, things like that can be really helpful. Not for it would help everyone, but it might not do the full solution, but it's a good starting point. We've got individual choice plays a role in ADHD treatments. 100% people need choice. You cannot say, well, if you didn't want medication, then that's your fault. You don't deserve help. No, we all have choice. Understanding meds enhances management. So you understand how the medication works. Will it allow you to better navigate your ADHD traits? And this is an interesting one. It's got the lowest one out of all. And I can see, because maybe some of you are like, I don't need to know how it works. I just need to know that it does work. And interesting. Personally, for me, I love to know how things work. I don't believe in otherwise. I think every medication I'm on is a placebo unless I really know the science, but maybe that's just me. So moving nicely on, we're on to the Biopsychosocial model of ADHD. Essentially, just break that down. You've got biology, psychology, and social factors. So they normally say it takes 2 to tango. In ADHD, it takes 3 to tango. I'm not sure what that would look like, but it's a multiple approach. So we're going to be comparing ADHD to other medical fields. It seems a bit weird, like cardiology, like your heart. Why do we never make these comparisons? Like mental health and neurodivergence and like physical health, it's like 2 massive worlds apart. Maybe we shouldn't be looking at them so differently. There's this like pyramid of like how care is done. And we often don't put the same emphasis. You know what people say, like, well, you can say you got a broken leg, no biggie. You say that you're struggling with depression, oh, taboo, let's not talk about it. Balancing the interventions in between. So these things are all interconnected. It isn't just about your genes. It isn't just about how you think and process information. And isn't all just about the neighborhood and where you grew up. It is all 3 that contributes to how you'll respond to different treatments. Hopefully that all makes sense. Now, this shows it breaks down a bit more, right? So biology.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, please do.
I know you said some people can't afford to take the medication, but is medication for ADHD very expensive to prescribe on via the GP?
Yeah, it's really expensive. So to get the medication on the NHS, it's a long waiting line and they do not give it out easily. But most people I know personally had to go private. And these are people who cannot afford, because the ADHD makes it a struggle to maintain a conventional full-time job. And thus they have a lower income, which makes it even more difficult to afford the medication. So unfortunately, yeah.
But I've been prescribed by it, but it's like a special order they put in from the doctor from the chemist? Is it because it's very expensive?
I don't know the answer to that, to be honest. It is definitely expensive, but as to why they're so precious over it, I'm not entirely sure. But the NHS does seem to be like treading on eggshells when it comes to diagnosing ADHD medication, where things like antidepressants are given out like Smarties, so I don't know.
Yeah, but the thing is, so it's a fact. People with ADHD are on lower income than compared to the rest of the population.
I would say yes. I mean, it doesn't mean that you don't have really high earners with ADHD, but had they have not had ADHD, maybe they would have earned even more. And again, that comes down to this social psycho model where it isn't just one thing, it's a combination of factors which ends in that result.
Thank you.
No worries. So again, the three main factors is like your biology, looking at your physical health, your genetic variability, and drug effects. Some people do not respond well to certain drugs. You know how like one person can have a pint and be completely smashed, and another person can drink like their whole body weight in alcohol and not feel a thing. The exact same thing can happen with normal medication. So it doesn't affect everyone the same way. So do not go around comparing doses. I know like yeah, I'm on 50 milligrams, 200 lightweight. Do not do that. Then we got psychological. This is like health, coping skills, relationships, self-esteem, mental health, and then social. Your relationship, your economic background, who you surround yourself with, religion, culture, all of those things. So it really, if you only treat one element of this triangle, you're probably not going to get the results you want. It's why that certain backgrounds experience higher levels of ADHD, not just because of all these factors.
What is genetic vulnerability? Sorry, genetic vulnerability.
Genetic vulnerability, meaning genetically you are more preposed, you're more likely to have ADHD. So let's say your like parents have ADHD. You're not guaranteed to have ADHD, but the likelihood of having ADHD is greatly increased.
Thank you.
So next thing we're going to have a little chat about is stigma and meds. The debate over stigmatizing in ADHD. For me, I think a biggest debate is around like children, because people are like, oh, kids be kids. And I won't lie, are people given ADHD medication who do not need it? Absolutely. But I'm going to keep that in your mind, because the research shows that more people who need the medication do not get it. So you've got to look at like both scales. And also pill shaming. It's not just the individual who's shamed, also the parents, like, oh, you're giving your kid medication. Oh, I wouldn't do that. And you've got to think, if people are being shamed, they might choose not to give it to their children, and they might actually benefit. Oh yeah, we got a question. Go for it.
Hi there. Hi, I'm here for the first time. Hi, Nat. So my name is Babika. I'm just saying because my children, they both have ADHD, and whenever we go to camps or school, everyone's saying they're looking fine, because I know they're masking at home. It is very visible, apparent that they have ADHD. And because of that, from last year, like we have every 6-month reviews, and they just keep on being pushed away saying they don't need medication. But I strongly feel one of them, if they have medication, it will help them greatly. So like, is that not a responsibility of CAMS or the NHS saying if the parent is concerned and they think that it would be right thing to trial it out at least for 6 months or a year and see how it goes? Can I fight on that, or how does it?
You can fight on it, but it's not going to be an easy fight. And I think because of all the, like, particularly in the 90s and 2000s, when there was all this negative press about too many children being given medication, that it really made people extra self-conscious about it all.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's maybe why people are more a bit like, I'm not sure. Ultimately, I think it is the individual's choice whether or not it's the right thing for them. And obviously, as a parent, you are the legal representative of the child. So each to their own, really. But it's not, from my experience, it is very difficult.
Okay. Are there any side effects or any negative effects on the children of this medication in longer term or anything? Are we going to cover that one?
We are hopefully going to cover a bit of that.
Okay,
but
sure. Thank you.
yeah, I mean,
All right.
before people get scared, every single medication ever has side effects.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's not something that we should be like, oh, let's stay away from it. You know,
Yeah.
take.
Absolutely. Agree. Thank you.
All right. So on this one, just a quick kind of get a feel of the room. How can we support those feeling pill shame for ADHD meds? We've got normalizing medication use, educating others, validating feelings, encouraging communication, supporting individuals. Obviously, I think all of these would be really useful, but we need to start changing the dialogue, because people who really would benefit, you know, we've got to look after them. Yeah, like I like this little image. It says, if you can't make your own neurotransmitters, store-bought is fine. And I think that's kind of nice, because again, some people's brains do not produce the same amount of chemical signals. So it's completely fine to top them up. We've got, okay, let's see, we've got education, got the biggest one, then encouraging communication, really interesting. Life has side effects, 100%. So now let's have a look on about too much medication. The debate over over-diagnosing and over-prescribing meds. I'm going to be looking at stimulation. Do more people have ADHD and neurodivergence than ever before? Yes. Does that mean there's a pandemic? No. It means we're getting better at prescribing, and more people becoming aware of it. Now, it does make it harder to determine, because of like the rates. Are more people genuinely becoming ADHD? Who knows? But it is most likely due to people getting more informed. Now, in your humble opinion, and again, this is personal preference, do you think there is overdiagnosis and overprescription in the ADHD field? And I just, you know, I'm quite neutral. I think there's pros and cons to everything. But yes, I will say this I can say this quite confidently, there is overdiagnosis and overprescription, particularly in developed countries like the US and other ones. Now, this doesn't mean that people don't have ADHD, but it does mean that, you know, like health systems are stretched, particularly if you're going into a private institute. They want to make you happy. So if you say, you know, I want this, they will give it. And a lot of the time when it comes to medication, people do not actually know what's going to help you. Doctors aren't very good at knowing what the problem is. They're very good at knowing what the problem isn't. And that's what they do. It's a process of elimination. So a lot of the time, the medication won't have that bad of side effects. They'll try it and they'll see if it works. And if not, they'll correct the course. Here's some quick stats about ADHD, which I think are really interesting. And these are UK focused. ADHD med, 1.4 million children and 2.8% of adults are diagnosed. That's a lot. But really, comparably, not that much. Stimulant meds, those are the most common medication. Most people have stimulants, work for about 70 or 80% of ADHD. The others will have non-stimulants. And it's just different ways that the chemicals work in the brain. So 9 times out of 10, you'll get a stimulant, but you can go back and forth. You know, if something stops working, if your body becomes more tolerant, they might change it up. 30% need a different or combination of medications. So one thing I will say, if someone takes medication and it doesn't work for them, there are other alternatives. Do not, or if you're trying something and the side effects are too strong, there are other alternatives.
Sorry to interrupt again.
Yeah, no.
Nat. So how do I know whether that's the stimulant or is it the actual ADHD medicine because I've been taking something from last 2 months and I have no idea. I'm just finding it a bit surprising to see what I've been prescribed and what I'm taking.
Oh, well, I mean, they do work quite differently in the brain. So it is quite useful for you to know the difference if you think that would be useful for you. One thing you could do is simply just Google your medication. And it will tell you it's a stimulant or non-stimulant.
Okay,
and
great.
Again, I'm not going to go into the details, but essentially think like one way is like phoning the brain, like, hey, you should do that. And the other one is texting it. So it's just a different way of getting that information across.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, we've got what type of natural medications there are. to be honest, it's just kind of like healthy living, to be supposed, just looking after yourself. You are what you eat. But if anyone has any other options, we've got collaborating with healthcare providers is important for optimal medication. And this is really important. So while you might have your preference, I highly, listen to your healthcare provider. You don't have to take their advice, but they are also very qualified and trained. So, try and be open-minded. We've got studying my family tree. I can spot people who were probably ND. Yeah, same here. The more you learn, the more you realize. Oh, Gifty says my partner has ADHD with Asperger's. He medicates and has practiced mindfulness. That helps him a lot. Yes, mindfulness, CBT can be really useful. So another question, why are people with ADHD traits prescribed medication? Now, this might seem an obvious one, but take a moment to think about it. Why do we even bother giving medication to those with ADHD? We don't give it to people with autism typically, or those with dyslexia or dyspraxia. Is it even necessary at all? And I think it often goes back to understanding exactly what ADHD is. It's not necessarily a chemical imbalance. I think that's inaccurate to say, but it's how the brain absorbs the chemicals, reproduces them, kind of communicates with the brain. We got to manage their traits. Yes, there's nothing wrong with ADHD. It's a natural, my opinion is it's a natural part of being human. We all have variations in how the brain processes information, but some of the traits do not gel well with modern society, and they might put someone at a disadvantage or might give them unnecessarily struggle. So medication can help level the playing field. For other people, it's, their body isn't producing certain chemicals. So this is just a way of leveling it out. Again, not really that much difference from feeling a bit sluggish in the morning and having a coffee. It's doing the exact same thing almost. Donna says, my daughter says with low dopamine, it's impossible to do all the things that help with the symptoms like exercise, diet, supplements, even going to a counselor. Yes, Donna, I like that because often it's not one or the other. You can pick a combination. A lot of the time, in order to access the more holistic non-medication routes, you might need medication to start with in order to be able to concentrate and stay attentive enough. So it can be both, and often both is the best approach for some. If it helps and more benefits, the problem is it's a no-brainer for me, especially if more productive. Yeah, and again, with these things you can try, as far as I know, there's no lasting consequences. I think, always speak with your doctor. Okay, Eve says yes to the combo of therapies and medication. Now, on the other side, if we play devil's advocate, and it's always good to be balanced, while most people there is a massive amount of overdiagnosis and overprescribing, 3 out of 4 people with ADHD receive no support. So even though they would benefit from the support, they receive no support. So on one hand, we are overdiagnosing and over-medicating. And on the other hand, there's still a lot of people who are not getting that option and support. So, you've got to think if there's not many consequences or side effects, maybe it's better to do it this way because a lot of people aren't getting the help. We need to strive for the right interventions, either it's social, psychological, or pharmacological. And it's finding the right solution for the right person, taking into a number of different factors. Are there any benefits to getting a diagnosis if they don't want to be medicated? Absolutely. Younger people for school and education and exams could be really beneficial. And for adults, I would say it's a personal decision. It can help justify or kind of help you understand your own thinking and processing. Okay, how to ensure ADHD help goes to those who need it. This is a really difficult one because at the moment, it's a bit of a scattergun approach. Anyone who shows any characteristics of ADHD, whether or not they have ADHD, will get medication. But that means that other people who need it aren't getting hold of it. How do we make sure the people who definitely would benefit from it, regardless of income, culture, background, can have it rather than it kind of being sucked up by some social movement, such as has happened in the US? Okay, yes. Oh, he says, oh, yes, let me add adaptation/empathy at school to my combo. Really important point. Now, I'm going to go on to the next one for this, just because I appreciate this is a difficult question and we've got a lot to cover. Now I'm going to be looking at the diagnostic challenges, because one of the reasons why a lot of people do not get access to the support is that they do not quite meet the criteria for ADHD. Now, you might think ADHD, ADD, are they the same thing? Tomato, tomato? Well, they used to be different. Now they're not, but they still are. So ADHD is attention deficit hyperactive disorder, and ADD is attention deficit disorder. So someone who doesn't demonstrate the hyperactive tendencies. But ADHD is the blanket approach. You'll just get diagnosed with ADHD, but do know it can affect you in different ways. And there's also different systems depending on like who uses it. There's a little bit of wiggle room with these things. It's not really a direct science at the moment, because again, we're not looking at biological factors. Now, on this one, it says, how can we make sure ADHD diagnoses are accurate and useful? Because we know that ADHD, the way we diagnose isn't perfect, are there things that could help? So maybe we could update the diagnostic criteria to kind of encompass people of different backgrounds, different genders, just have it a bit refreshed. It's not the most up-to-date book at the moment. And also it's heavily debated, and you could argue, follow the money. Do we consider diverse perspectives? So knowing that different backgrounds have different ways of showing it. Do we use a standardized assessment so everyone, no matter who, is diagnosed the exact same way? I could also see that being a bit problematic in places. We've got integrate biological and environmental factors. So maybe, are you currently on benefits? Do you have private health care? Does your family have multiple children? There are other factors which can influence how you might support someone. Prioritize individual care. So rather than saying, ADHD, it's more like, okay, this is what it looks like for you, rather than a blanket approach. And continuously evaluating the criteria. Though we do currently do that, it's not very often. Like 2013, 2015, there's a big gap in between how often these things are updated. Maybe we are overly careful, or maybe not. These are really difficult questions, okay? So if you have no idea, do not worry. And if you get really passionate about something, good on you, but do know there's multiple, this is a very debated subject. Now, on this one, I just want to challenge you all to rethink how you think about mental health and neurodivergence, and think maybe if we compare it more to physical health, there might be other advantages. So let's take blood pressure, for example. You think about how are people physically moving, looking after their health, mentally, do they have the right mindset in looking well, and also socially, are they putting themselves in situations which could increase their blood pressure? So they're taking a very well-rounded approach in how to best support someone to manage their blood pressure. But when we think of mental health, we don't often think of like a 360 view. It's very much focused on, say, like one area. So never disregard the importance of physical, social, and mental working in tandem. Oh, we got Monica. Will the slides be available? Well, it is recorded, so you are very welcome to get this. Interested in ones explaining? Nice. Yes, you will have access. Now, why are there different treatments for ADHD versus physical health? Well, there's a few reasons, really. It is different. First of all, stigma. People think, it's not really the same, is it? Let's treat it a little bit different. Other options why it's treated differently. Oh, no, we've got stigma, go away. Okay, let's get a new one. Come on, not stigma again. Insurance, yes. Mainly involved for countries who do not have universal health care, but there's a big difference in insurance. It is treated very separately. And often insurance will cover physical health. It will not cover mental health. Bloody stigma, go away. All right, so we've got holistical, we've got complexities, understanding. So there are many different ways or reasons why we do not look at it with a similar lens. We give it a very kind of light touch. What is the biggest lesson from physical health treatment that we could use to improve neurodivergent care, particularly with those with ADHD? So these are things that we do standard practice when it comes to physical health, which we do not do for mental health or neurodivergence. Maybe prevention. Is there things we can do, which means the likelihood of needing medicational support is going to be less? Early detection, should we help people get diagnosed earlier? Holistic approaches, are there kind of non-pharmaceutical responses such as CBT, meditation, mindfulness that could work as a first point of action? Different treatment options. Are there more than one way to skin a cat, as they say? I hate that term, very visual. Or integrated care, where we take a bit of all sorts. So let's see what all of you lovely people think would have the biggest lesson. And we've got a more holistic approach. Woo! So that could be the best thing we can do. Yeah, because I think sometimes on the other side, people are too quick to jump straight to the medication route, and actually there are other avenues that you might want to explore first. Philosophy and neurodivergence's diagnosis. So we have a tendency to reserve philosophical aspects of diagnosis for mental health and neurodivergence. What all this is saying is we do not think of them in the same light, and maybe we should kind of compare them more. Why do we mainly debate the philosophy of diagnosis in mental and not physical health? So what this is saying is, why do we care so much about the ethics of mental health and supporting people with ADHD and medications, but when it comes to physical health, no one cares? Oh, a bit of a headache, take a paracetamol, or oh, I've got bad back pain, yeah, take this, that will sort it out. No one has any issue. You never have anyone pill shaming you for a physical health, but with mental health, suddenly we got to put this under a lens. Suddenly Karen comes out and starts saying, I wouldn't do that if I was you, and you're like, why? I mean, it also comes down to stigma, doesn't it, really? But it is something that we've got to continuously reevaluate, that we always treat these things very differently. All right, we've got ignorance. Yeah, people are ignorant. Fear. People are scared of the unknown. It's not a new thing, but we treat it as if it's a new thing. Now, diagnosis and the individual, because other cultures respond to conditions such as ADHD very different than the Western perspective. Some cultures will focus on the individual rather than the environment. And actually, this is very much how we do it at the moment in the Western world. We focus on the individual. What can the individual do rather than what the environment can do? So can schools support people better? Can workplaces support people better? Why are we putting all the emphasis on the individual? Maybe we could change the environment. When we're creating our workspaces, could we create them in a way which is more ADHD friendly, rather than relying on the individual to have to take medical interventions in order to just survive in a standard environment? Comparisons to other branches of healthcare. You often compare to other branches, and maybe we need a different approach. So you see, I'm saying contradicting things today, and that's because it is a complicated area. One approach which they've done in other communities is you might talk with the community. So rather than just one individual, you would speak together. Okay, what can we do? How can we support the people? How can we make things more friendly? Then we'll do an annual report, then we do surveys, and then the community has a diagnosis. So rather than say a medical professional diagnoses you, it's more a community diagnosis. Not saying this is the best approach, I'm just saying there's multiple approaches, and we normally only focus one approach in the UK and similar countries. How can we consider a person's environment and social context in supporting those with ADHD? Good question, right? It's all well and good me saying, you should think about other things as well, but how can we actually do it? Could we involve family, caregivers, and community support? Should everyone have a say or not? I could see arguments for both sides. Tailor treatment to cultural factors. So if someone comes from, say, a conservative Christian community, or British born Chinese, are we taking these different factors in terms of the outlook into consideration? I know of a lot of people from different cultures, and culturally, they might be very against Western medication. Do we have alternatives for those who do not subscribe to that model? Addressing social determinants like poverty and discrimination. So it's all well and good telling someone they need medication, but if they can't afford it, or if they don't have access to it, what are we going to do instead? At the moment, it's very much, one size fits all. And we know that our society is very, very different. Oh, I think the problem is viewing mental health issues as a character weakness rather than a health concern. Yeah, interesting view for sure. Medication in ADHD. Medication as part of the bigger picture. Stimulant medication and non-stimulant medications as an example. So hopefully this is where we're going in a bit more detail. A quote which is really damn old, by the way, but I think is interesting, is from Marcus Tullius Cicero. When I can't read something, I'll just kind of mutter under my breath and hope that you misheard. I genuinely just can't read it. So he says, medicines can only cure curable diseases, and then not always. And when it comes to ADHD, I think this is really interesting. Medicines can only cure curable diseases. So what this is saying, we know ADHD is not a disease. It's a different variation in terms of how the brain processes. So with this quote in mind, despite this being thousands of years old, medication can't cure ADHD. And this is really important to know. It cannot cure ADHD, nor should you wish it, some may argue. And even if it could, it might not always cure it. But what we are doing with medication, we are supporting people with traits, individual traits. So if you have ADHD and the traits that you exhibit do not interfere with your day-to-day life, there is no need to medicate. You do not need to medicate if it is not having an impact on your life. It is only when you are noticing that you are struggling or there are challenges that you can do to support individual characteristics of ADHD. But no amount of medication will ever take that ADHD away from you because it is inherently part of the individual, or at least a lot of people think that way. So just be mindful. ADHD medication does not cure ADHD. It supports with traits. Now looking a little bit at the future, where are we going in the future? Treating symptoms with multidisciplinary signatures and trajectories. This is saying, at the moment, we're focusing very much on psychology. Maybe we could look at biology in the future, going under the hood. What exactly is ADHD? At the moment, there are still so many unknowns. Maybe you could have personalized medication that is suited for you as an individual. Rather than a shot in the dark, what you're having is tailor-made for you. We've got potential benefits and drawbacks of moving beyond diagnosis focus on treating symptoms in ADHD care. So while kind of looking at ADHD from a different perspective, pros and cons could come. But looking at some of the positives, we've got, if we take biology into a more centralized concern for this, it's more personalized, it's more flexible, it arguably reduces stigma. So it could do the opposite, and it could be more holistic. So again, it's not like everyone in this room who has ADHD, you're having this one magic pill. It's saying, everyone, let's have an individual chat and find what works out best for you. The more individual we make something, the more gray areas, the more nuance that comes as a result of it. Insurance. I hate insurance. It's dull and it's boring. Well, sorry, some of you work in insurance, but it's not for me, but it makes it complicated. And research. How do we research these things? And more stigma, if you notice stigmas on both of them, and misinterpretations. My final thoughts is, should ADHD be treated with medication? It's a debated subject. There isn't a yes or no answer to this. Medication can be helpful in managing symptoms and improving quality of life. I would say that's not debated. Medication has been proven to support people. Doesn't mean it's for everyone, but there is evidence to back that it is useful. Non-medication approaches such as therapy should be considered. Do not disregard more softer approaches like therapy. They are very useful, and often they can be used together rather than individual. Treatment decisions should be made with a healthcare provider. As great as I am, do not go after Nat said this. Speak with a professional. Have that discussion, and always know that your point of view and your perspective is just as important. You do not have to rely solely on the medical professional. You can have that chat. And medication is not a cure and should be used with other forms of support. This one I cannot stress enough. Oh, Suzanne says we all wear shoes, but not all the same size, style, or components because our feet are different, as is our ND. I like that, Suzanne. That's a really nice way of putting it, and it's a good visual image. Oh, Kerry says, can I ask a question? Alcohol and ADHD. My son is hyper-focused normally and very forgetful, not hyper. When he has alcohol, he becomes very hyper and I dread it. Is it common when the two are mixed? Well, alcohol does affect your neurotransmitters, so it makes complete sense that it would have an impact for certain. Now, if any of you want to get in contact, here's our information. And the last thing I want to share with you is if any of you are feeling, I've got a bit of free time today, do consider giving me a cheeky vote. I got nominated for an award. Just quickly, could you please mention about NHS med costs? Is it free? Lucy, if you get it on the NHS, you have to pay the standard like £9 something, but you often have to, a lot of people have to go private. So anyway, this is that. Hope you all found this very useful. And yes, we're done. Honestly, it was a lot today. It was a lot, but I really hope you found it useful, everyone. And hopefully for those of you who haven't come before, I'll get to see you again. All right. Bye, everyone. Have a lovely rest of your Thursdays. Fingers crossed, I'll see you next Thursday.